You're listening to the Quint's podcast.
India and China are holding Lieutenant General level talks on 6th June in a bid to de-escalate the tensions between the countries along the line of actual control in Ladakh. There have been a couple of fistfights, injured soldiers, and an ongoing standoff between the Indian Army and the People's Liberation Army at 40,000 feet at Galwan Valley in East Ladakh over boundary differences. The build-up at the border has been triggered by what defense experts say Chinese transgression over the disputed border between the countries, with the PLA pitching tents, bringing troops over in thousands, while on the Indian side, anti-Chinese sentiments have flared up again on social media with a call to go Swadeshi and boycott Chinese goods. Relations between the two nations have seen its ups and downs since the Sino-Indian War of 1962, but not a single bullet has been fired across the border since 1975. Will the current tensions escalate or continue a little longer, or will diplomacy champion once again? In this podcast, we'll hear from Manoj Joshi, Distinguished Fellow at the Observer Research Foundation, and Dr. Shashi Tharoor, Senior Congress Leader. You're tuned in to The Big Story, the podcast where we dissect the headline-making news for you. And I'm your host, Shorbori. While the build-up has been going on since late April, the Indian and Chinese governments have mostly been tight-lipped over the matter, offering statements but very little details. But recently, we finally heard from the centre. Speaking to News 18, Defence Minister Rajnath Singh said that a quote-unquote sizable number of PLA soldiers were stationed at the border, and he also informed the decision to hold senior military commander level talks. He said, and I'm quoting him, quote, "In today's situation, military talks are going on, and possibly on June 6th, talks are going to happen at the level of senior military officers. I spoke to the army chief and others today, and they have informed me." End quote. While China's Global Times has been outrightly critical of the Indian government for the current escalation, we heard directly from the Chinese Foreign Ministry after US President Donald Trump offered to mediate over what he described as, quote-unquote, a raging border dispute between the countries. We know that Trump and Modi did hold a telephonic conversation on 2nd June, a few days after his tweet, and when asked about the set call, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zhao Lijian told a daily media briefing in Beijing that there was no need for the intervention of a third party. He also said that India and China have, quote-unquote, the capacity to resolve issues through dialogue and negotiations. But what do we make of Trump's offer? What is his vested interest in this matter? Manoj Joshi, Distinguished Fellow at the Observer Research Foundation, says that it could be Trump's election tactic.
देखिए, ट्रम्प साहब जो है उनका इस साल चुनाव है, इलेक्शन है, नवंबर में इलेक्शन होगा, और वो घबराए हुए हैं कि अमेरिका में जो
The US elections are coming up in November, and Trump is worried about the crumbling economy and 1 lakh plus deaths caused by COVID-19. Before the pandemic, he was hoping that the strong economy would help him get re-elected, but now he's a little worried. Now his election strategy hinges on China. So when any China-related disputes are reported, he shifts his focus on them. In this case also, his advisors may have informed about the Indo-China issue. Since there has been no further escalation in tensions between the two countries, we are unsure who advised him to offer to mediate.
उनको बताया होगा उनके जो सलाहकार हैं कि भारत और चीन के बीच में ये हो रहा है, तो उनके दिमाग में जैसे अक्सर बात अपने आप आ जाती है, तो वो अगर सूत्र कह रहे हैं कि बात ही नहीं हुई है और कहां से उन्होंने कहां से क्या कह दिया, तो मैं यही कह सकता हूं कि उनके दिमाग में चीन काफी गहरी तरह से बैठा हुआ है और कहीं भी विवाद हो तो वो उस पे कूदना चाहते हैं.
But to go back to Zhao's statement, he also said that Beijing has strictly abided by the relevant treaty and is committed to upholding national, territorial and sovereign security, as well as upholding peace and stability in the border region. So what is the current conflict all about? What exactly has triggered China to want to uphold its territorial sovereignty? In a previous episode of The Big Story, we had broken down the possible reasons for this sudden flare-up at the border and why such skirmishes keep popping up around the 3,488-kilometer-long disputed border between India and China. Please do check it out. I'll leave the link to the episode on the show notes. But to give you a small recap, there are a few plausible theories on what could have agitated China. One would be the construction of the Darbuk-Sheok-Daulat-Beg Road on the Indian side. The DSDBO road in concern connects Leh to the Karakoram Pass. The disputed border between the countries run through a very high altitude and extremely harsh Himalayan terrain that China has long been developing. And in the last few years, even India has started building roads to catch up to China. And this is a break from India's decades-old unsaid policy of not developing border infrastructure to prevent its misuse by invading enemy forces. Alternatively, experts have also said that it could be China's tactic to regain some of its credibility as India joined 62 other countries, including EU countries, in backing a draft resolution for a probe into the COVID-19 outbreak. And it's not just in the Himalayan border. China is also reasserting itself in South China Seas. It's stepping up its maneuvers around Taiwan and has also asserted its control on Hong Kong. So is China trying to rebuild its image internationally? This is what Dr. Shashi Tharoor, senior Congress leader, said.
Because there's been a lot of move towards, quote-unquote, decoupling from China. You may remember the Japanese announced a $2 billion fund to encourage Japanese companies to leave China and relocate back to Japan. Another $250 million for those who couldn't relocate to Japan but were willing to go to third countries. So there's this desire now to reduce dependence on China because China is seen as an untrustworthy, secretive country that will even have a virus and lie about it instead of saving the rest of the world and so on. China does have a serious problem. Now, they've tried to overcome that with many steps, the most effective of which has been their generous assistance to countries. For example, in Europe, Italy and Serbia have benefited from medicines, from doctors, from protective equipment, all sorts of things the Chinese have been sending either on loans or gifts to these countries. And that kind of checkbook diplomacy often works very well. Countries are grateful to get help when they're in crisis. Secondly, the Chinese have also at the same time started their factories humming. They've said, we are over the worst. The virus has been eradicated thanks to our effective measures. Now we're ready to manufacture for the world again. And they're obviously way ahead of anybody else in reviving their manufacturing and their economy. And third, you're right, they seem to be asserting themselves wherever they can. South China Sea, they've asserted themselves. Border with India, they're asserting themselves. With Hong Kong, they've just passed a new national security law and they're asserting themselves. Taiwan may well be next. So there is at the same time a part of a sort of third prong of their strategy appears to be a certain assertiveness. But whereas Hong Kong can do nothing about it because they are still a part of China, we are not, and we can certainly stand up for ourselves. And that's where I hope the government will do so. I have enough faith in our diplomacy and our military that they can stand up effectively for Indian national interests. I just want the elected government to show leadership and to communicate with the people of India.
But what's currently happening in India over this is something we've seen before many times. A growing anti-China rhetoric. Remove China apps, which apparently helps purge all Chinese games and software from Android phones, have gotten really popular with Indians. Even yoga guru Baba Ramdev had posted a video as a national service by showing the step-by-step deletion of several Chinese apps. And we do know that earlier in April, India had said stricter screening rules will also apply to foreign direct investments from China, which the country found to be extremely discriminatory. Now, Chinese media, Global Times, said that these kind of boycotts are basically a way to steer attention away from the mishandling of the pandemic. But can these protests in India even help? Dr. Tharoor thinks the opposite. He believes that helping China develop an economic stake in India may of be some interest to us.
I don't think it's either practical or effective. It's not practical because the Chinese are actually very, very involved in our economy. They're trading with us to the tune of about $69 billion coming from them to us. And not all of it is in sort of small rubber slippers we're buying in the shops or whatever. A lot of it is capital goods and investments that factories and big businesses and industries are using. And those can't be got rid of very easily. Secondly, helping China develop an economic stake in India may be in our interest if we want to reduce the premium on any adventurism. Because the more they have at stake within India, then the less good an argument it would be for somebody in the PLA to say, let's march and take Tawang tomorrow or whatever, because if they tried that stunt, they would be jeopardizing billions of dollars of Chinese investments in India. So there's an objective argument for encouraging more Chinese investment, not less.
India and China have successfully used diplomatic tactics to subdue these tensions previously, but will it escalate this time? Mr. Joshi believes that there are no signs of an escalation, and he also says that India should be very clear about its priorities of economic development.
नहीं, जहां तक मेरा अंदाज है कोई ऐसी स्थिति तो है नहीं जिससे कि कोई झड़प होगी या लड़ाई होगी. मैं समझता हूं कि ऐसे कई इलाके हैं लाइन ऑफ एक्चुअल कंट्रोल में जहां ये इस टाइप की बातें होती हैं, और ज्यादातर अभी तो लोकल कमांडर्स के लेवल पे बात हो रही है, फिर उसके आर्मी के ही थोड़ा ऊंचे स्तर पे बात होती है, और अभी तक
According to my estimation, nothing points towards an escalation. There are some talks happening at the LAC. Right now, the talks are happening at the levels of local commanders. Then it could be with higher officers. Maybe there will be diplomatic talks too. There is none of that right now. At the NSA level or the ministerial level, prime ministerial, presidential levels. But there won't be any escalation. Even though Indian media has reported about tanks being brought in, but the area is too narrow for tanks. India has to tread cautiously. China has economic strength and investment capacity beyond USA too, perhaps. We should make use of the situation. It can't be resolved with pride. We should prioritize on economic well-being of this country. And to achieve that, if we need to get FDIs from China, then we should do that, even Pakistan if necessary. Our end goal should be clear. And an economically weak country like India can only have one goal: economic development.
और अगर चीन से एफडीआई लाना है, चीन से लाइए. मैं तो कहता हूं अगर पाकिस्तान से भी लाना है, पाकिस्तान से लाइए अगर हिम्मत है. पर सवाल ये है कि हमारा लक्ष्य जो है बिल्कुल स्पष्ट होना चाहिए. जैसे वो अर्जुन की बात है ना कि वो मछली आंख की बात है. तो मेरी समझ में इस गरीब भूखे नंगे देश का एक ही लक्ष्य हो सकता है, वो है आर्थिक विकास.
If you like listening to this episode, please subscribe to the Big Story playlist for episodic updates. We're live on Apple, Google Podcast, Spotify, JioSaavn, and most of the other popular podcast streaming platforms. For other podcasts, please log on to the Quint website and check out the podcast section. For any feedback, shoot an email to podcasts@thequint.com.
Thanks for listening. Log on to the Quint's website and check out our other podcasts.